Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
Este episodio es presentado por Honda. Descubra la nueva Honda Passport Trail Sport todoterreno. La Passport más todoterreno que Honda haya imaginado jamás. Esta Passport cuenta con mayor altura al suelo, barras de techo en todas sus versiones y neumáticas especialmente diseñados para cualquier terreno. Además, disfruta todos tus viajes con el control de clima de 3 zonas, techo panorámico y opciones como asientos delanteros con calefacción y ventilación. Conoce más en honda.com/passport.
You found your person. Now let the knot help you with everything else. The knot connects you to the wedding inspo, vendors, venues, and planning tools you need to make your day totally you. Having helped plan 25 million weddings, we've got your back when it comes to every little detail like RSVPs, budgets, and more. Because your wedding comes to life with the connections that matter the most. Get started at theknot.com/audio. The Knot. Let's plan your wedding together.
We passed over a destroyed land. You were not in it, do not know what hell looks like. We can have today only one purpose, and that is to see this thing through to the end.
Meanwhile, in the Ardennes, the Americans have recaptured the initiative, moving step by step back over the lost ground.
It was an absolute death trap for the Panzers. In the lead was the Panzers of First Company. Then came our company with SS Hauptsturmführer Kurt Brödel in command. I myself was positioned between SS Oberscharführer Johann Beutelhauser, my platoon commander. As I reached a point near the church, I was given a foretaste of the dire events to come. Beutelhauser catching it right in front of me. We had already passed over the second crossing. When Beutelhauser caught it, I was able to make out the approximate position of the anti-tank gun. Beutelhauser succeeded in getting out and reaching a place of safety, but the gun layer was hit by rifle fire as he got out. I moved my panzer behind a house where it could not be seen or fired on, without, at that moment, knowing what would happen. Near me, Brödel's panzer was burning gently, with Brödel sitting lifeless in the turret. In front of me, further along the road, more panzers had been put out of action and were still burning. However, one was still moving. I think it was Freyer's, and under my covering fire, he was able to move back to where the unit was later engaged. Some of our shot-up crews who had hidden in a barn took advantage of this opportunity and likewise fell back with the panzer protecting them from being observed. This enabled them to escape, being taken prisoner by the American infantry surrounding them. Behind me, SS Sturmwandführer Arnold Jürgensen's Panther suddenly appeared. I realized that I must abandon my hopeless position and tried to pull back behind the crossing. It was clear to me that the American anti-tank gun had anticipated this maneuver and was ready to fire on the crossing. And that is just what it did. The first shot missed. The second hit the track and the hull on the side. Fortunately, no one was killed, but the radio set was destroyed and the track was almost unusable. I was just able to follow the advice of Jürgensen. Then the track came off one side and the running wheel sank in the mud that later froze hard. The whole attack had come to a standstill, and our new position we made out about 20 of the enemy in a hollow under a tarpaulin, and then saw them quickly emerging. So the enemy was still in various houses in the part of the village we had already occupied. Some of them also ambushed our comrade Bandov and shot him through the heart while he was unsuspectingly trying to camouflage tanks with planks of wood. This happened quite close to me, right under my eyes. And that was an account of the fighting in Krinkelt on the 18th of December by the Panther commander Willy Fischer from 3rd Company SS Panzer Regiment 12.
You did that absolutely magnificently, can I say?
Thanks, Jim.
The village.
I mean, the drama.
I've got to say, if I was German, I'd quite like to be called Beutelhauser.
I'd like to be called Beutelhauser, but I wouldn't want to be taking some
panzer up into a village crawling with Americans with bazookas and 57 mils, 6-pounders or whatever. I mean, no way.
I
No
mean,
thanks.
what will become increasingly clear is the importance of American artillery in its various forms in this battle. And here we have it. The anti-tank gun anticipating the maneuver of the Panther.
Yeah.
And the Panther being unable to do anything about that and just getting clobbered. I mean, just fascinating. But we promised at the end of the last episode that we were going to talk a little bit about the Battle of the Twin Villages, and so we are. But before we do that, we need to talk about what's going on in the High Command, really.
Yes. Yeah, we do.
At the end of day one, beginning of X+1.
Yeah.
The 17th of December. So huge problems for the Germans. The trouble is that the temperatures are not freezing. That it's cold, it's miserable, there's low cloud. Inevitably, there's been not a single sign of the 2,000 Luftwaffe fighter planes that have been promised. Because, surprise, surprise, it's 10 dense cloud, which is the reason why they're doing it when they're doing it.
Oh, God.
I know, it's so mad, isn't it?
I can't do the contradictions, Jim. I can't deal with them.
No, I know. We live in a world of contradictions, and this is just enhancing that. But what it means is that the ground is just really, really badly chewed up by the kind of vast weight of traffic, which is going over roads which are just not designed for that. These are roads that are constructed in the reinforced in the 1920s and 1930s, then predominantly dirt roads. And as we've said before, they're designed for kind of the odd light car, kind of, horse-drawn vehicles. They're just not designed for massive, great Panzer tanks.
No. And for all the sort of, perving on great big German tanks that was happening at the time, because after all, in that earlier episode, Hitler's saying, our tanks are fewer, but they are superior to American tanks, or the Americans may have more, but ours are better. Or for all the sort of tank perving that goes on around German panzers, these vehicles are problematic on these kind of roads. They just are, and particularly this time of year. And even simple things like all the gradients mean if you're driving uphill in a big heavy vehicle, you're burning more fuel. Yeah. All that stuff. Or if you're off-road, you're burning more fuel. Also, I mean, the other thing that's going on is, don't forget, we have an airborne operation tied up in all this.
Oh, my God. Yes. I mean, it's just total fiasco.
Yeah. Operation Stosser. Of course, they're trying to do an airborne operation in the winter. So the weather gets a vote with airborne operations far more than in normal ops.
And with transport aircraft whose crews are not experienced at operating with airborne troops. Sound familiar, anyone?
Oh, God. Well, I mean, given the Germans invented this sort of form of operational art, is a bit, it's all a bit desperate and kind of tragic, really. They dropped 200 men near Bonn. Only 10 of the aircraft get anywhere near the drop zones. This sounds positively British. The winds are very strong.
It's very Sicily, isn't it?
It's very Sicily.
Winds very strong. Yes, tick. Hardly anyone landing where they're supposed to. Tick.
Wow. Men landing, being blown onto the propellers of aircraft behind. That's a new one, right? Well, we'll add that.
Yeah. Even the Brits and Americans over Sicily didn't do that.
Oh, God. So by dawn of X+1, von der Heiter, who's been, sprung from the Fallschirmjäger Academy, has only 150 men at the 200 he's supposed to drop. So at least they're making their rendezvous, most of them. They haven't got their weapons canisters, and they've only got 8 of the 500 Panzerfaust they've come with.
Yeah. So the Americans captured them all, didn't they?
Yeah. Yeah, and von der Heiter thinks it's been an utter failure, and I think
utter failure.
I think we can agree with that.
Yeah,
he's not going. That's not 90% successful, 80% successful, 10%
that's
successful.
100% total cock up.
Total cock up.
The great news is that we don't have to linger any further on that. We can just pin it.
That's the end of that. Yeah,
that's the end of that. Operation Stosser is alles kaputt.
Alles kaputt. Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the US High Command, they've suddenly realised that the Germans have broken through in 5 different places, with clearly the most threatening position in the Lossheim Gap and around the 106th Golden Lions Division. But, the Americans are, slow to kind of realise what's happening in many ways. So it's General Hodges, of course, is the commander of the US First Army, and he's thinking that the German assault is only a spoiling attack. By the afternoon of the 16th of December, he's realised it's something much bigger. Bradley is also slow to realise. Bradley's out of sorts, isn't he?
Yeah.
At this time. He's not feeling very well.
No.
He's feeling a little bit kind of disgruntled about everything.
Yeah.
Because the war's dragging on, the burdens of command, all that kind of stuff. And I don't think he's a kind of laugh-a-minute kind of guy ananyway, is he?
No, he's not. He's just very serious and sort of...
Which doesn't mean he hasn't got a sense of humour. He does, but he's out of sorts. So he's
with Ike.
Slow to realise what's going on. But actually, the one person who absolutely gets it right from the word go is Ike Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander.
Because Bradley's gone to see Ike,
they're drinking Johnny Walker Black and playing bridge together, aren't they? And that's how they've done their get together, their briefing, and had their chat.
And smoking 400 Camels.
Exactly. And as they get the news, Ike goes, no, this is the real thing. Bradley's saying this can't be an offensive because there's no strategic objective there. Yeah. And he's right, of course. I think we've made our point in the last few episodes that, only a madman would do Herbsnabel. Just so happens that a madman has ordered this attack.
Or someone who's lost all sense of reality.
Yeah, completely. And so Ike makes orders. And one of the things, of course, Hitler's banked on is the fact that Ike won't be able to order reinforcements because he'll have to check with his bosses, because that's what his field marshals or generals of the army, as it were, would have to do, wouldn't they? You know, so he's judging the Americans by their own standards. And Ike orders Simpson's 9th Armour to send the whole of 7th Armoured Div to help Troy Middleton. Already Combat Command B has already gone, and Patton to transfer 10th Armoured Division. So reinforcements from the south as well, from 3rd Army. And Simpson does it straight away.
Simpson is just so
good. He's the real deal. Yeah, he's a tremendous guy. Yeah. And so by 10 p.m. on the 16th, Simpson rings back and says 2 hours later, they're on their way. It's all done. Hodges then, at 10 p.m. on the 16th, Hodges, who's been umming and ahhing, orders 2nd Division to stop its attack on the Ruhr Dam and move back to the Elsenborg Ridge, which is the sort of next stretch of the corrugated iron we were talking about in the last chapter. And actually, when you get to the top of there, as we did, where there's a big radio mast, you can see everything laid out in front of you. You can see the whole lot, can't you, from up there?
Yeah. But again, it's not particularly high, is it?
No. But it's that relative high ground. And there's the main road running along. Yeah, exactly. Main road running along it. And he sends the big red one, are in the thick of it. They're sent.
Well, don't forget, they'd also been in the Hurtgen. They're the ones that were involved in the Battle for Aachen, as well as being on Omaha Beach on D-Day, etc., etc. So they're sent down as well. And they're sent down in pretty quick order. So it's not as quick as it could have been, but it's a hell of a lot quicker than the French moving around in 1940, put it that way. And
commonality of purpose and motivation is the thing. I mean, we did talk a couple of episodes ago about how very often there's a sort of description of kind of passivity on the American side at this stage. Well, actually, they're diverting from an offensive here. They're not sat around.
Yeah, and I can't even begin to stress how difficult that is to suddenly, your head, because everything is moving. Think of it as a sort of the gyro effect of how difficult it is to kind of deviate. Once your gyro's kind of rotating in one particular direction, to then make it go in another direction is quite difficult. And this is the same. You've got this, a divisional attack is quite a machine because everything's suddenly pointing one way.
Yep.
And they're all using roads that have been worked out to resupply with ammunition, with food and everything in one direction. So to move them in another direction, it's not just a case of charging across a field at 90 degrees to the route you've been doing. You've got to backtrack, you've got to turn around, you've got to find alternative routes, you've got to issue what those routes are. You've then got to rework out your supply lines. And your frontline troops have got to pass through your echelons. Your echelons have got to follow up behind. So the logistics of changing from one direction to 90 degrees heading southwards is really, really complicated. And it's made more complicated by the fact that you're actually suddenly moving quite a lot of units. So in this case, 2 armoured divisions, 2 infantry divisions. They've all got to use, they're all trying to get to the same direction. So there's then competition for roads. This is not a straightforward operation at all. We've talked about this before, but when armchair historians criticise the Allies for slow movement, they are simply not comprehending, understanding, taking into consideration enough the complications and difficulties of moving a formation of 15,000 men that is entirely 100% mechanized. You're talking hundreds of vehicles in a division.
Yeah.
Hundreds, if not thousands. I mean, it is a lot.
Making sure they don't all bump into each other, get tangled up, get confused. And also once you start organising artillery and everything, making sure you're not going to, shelling your own side and all that. So where the bounds are of advance, edges between each formation is, timings, all of this stuff, incredibly difficult.
One field battalion of 24 guns is probably half a mile road stretch.
Yeah.
At least. You've got the truck, you've got the gun, you've got the crew, you've got the ammunition. They've all got to be towed. 24 guns. By the time they're strung out, that's what you're talking about. And that's just one field battalion. That doesn't include your medical corps. It doesn't include your supply lines. It doesn't include your infantry. It doesn't include any, include your light anti-aircraft battalion. It doesn't include your anti-tank
component, all of that.
All that. So it is a big, big, big complicated thing, and someone's got to work this out in a pre-digital age. That's the point, and then work it out, agree it with their fellow units, decide it, accept it, issue the orders, enact the orders. Which is why those combat command from the 7th Armoured and 9th Armoured aren't likely to be supporting the 106th on the Schnee Eifel, or, backwards on the Auer Bleyauf Ridge by the dawn of the 17th of December. It's just not going to happen.
All I'm thinking of when we talk about this is some poor fried staff officer thinking, have I done it all?
Yeah. I've got to unpick all this and start all over again.
Yeah.
People don't, when they're talking about all this stuff, they don't talk about this.
Yeah.
Combat Command B of the 7th, got stuck in a bit of traffic and wasn't there till the 18th. In one sentence, you have just dismissed a whole kind of bucket load of trouble. And I think it is worth spelling it out why this is just not a straightforward activity. There are no motorways down which you can just burn and jump off at junction 23. It's not like that. And these are roads which are, for the most part, not tarmacked.
Yeah, I mean, of course it isn't. Right, so the 17th of December, so
Yes.
X+1. And I think it's quite interesting.
We're now heading south again.
Yeah, we're heading south. 28th Division front. 116th Panzer up front send 13 Panthers to bolster the Panzer Grenadiers. I mean, that's not very many, is it? It's not very many. And as a result, there's a great big tank and artillery battle that follows. By the afternoon, most of 116 Panzer's armour is committed to taking Oran.
Again, this is, it's an exploitation force which is being used in the breakthrough.
Yes, they're supposed to be rolling on through great tank country, aren't they? But they're not. They're bogged down trying to take a river. Late afternoon, US 112th Infantry.
This is on the 17th. This is X+1.
Still the same day. Given permission to pull back to the ridge behind Oran after dark. This has succeeded in holding up 5th Panzer Army.
For a second day. And then 112th Infantry veered northwards back towards St. Vit, which is after becoming a sort of, magnetic place as the battle progresses. Yes, so it's worth just saying that in the 28th Division, this is Norman Cota's mob, it's the 112th, 110th, 109th Infantry Regiments. The 112th pushes north and it veers north and joins up effectively with the 424th of the Golden Lions. So that regiment that was isolated on a southern limb from the other two, from the Schnee Eifel, comes back and pulls back to a little place called Winterspelt. The 112th pull up towards it. So what's interesting is that the 424th is sort of veering slightly southwards and backwards westwards. The 112th is veering slightly northwards. So they're coming alongside one another, even though they're from different divisions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the nature of this particular beast, isn't it? And now you get, this absolutely extraordinary fighting that starts to develop around St. Vit. It's 110th Infantry's front.
Yeah, so this is a bit further south. This is near Clairvaux.
Yeah.
Town of Clairvaux. So we were talking about the corrugated iron nature of these ridge lines running kind of sort of roughly south. So once you get off the Skyline Drive, which is the one that's west of the Uren and down to the Ur, you've got this ridge and it drops down from these villages along the top of this Skyline Drive down to the kind of a significant town, which is Clairvaux.
Yeah.
And this is where the 110th Infantry are. So then the next one down from the 112th. All part of the 28th Division.
And this is extraordinary. It's 31,000 Germans and 2,000 Americans. So Fuller's got 2 battalions, who are pretty scrappy after Hurtgen anyway, and they're hit by elements of 3 Panzer divisions and 2 infantry divisions. It's just, ladies and gentlemen, in the notes, Jim simply writes, yikes. And I think that about sums it up. But they hold a string of villages. 110th, they try to hold a string of villages on a ridge line, and it's 2nd Panzer Division, 116th Panzer, 26th Volksgrenadier. This is what they've been doing on the 16th on X-Tag. The Germans, are using battalions against companies and battalions against platoons because the Americans are fighting tooth and nail. And I think it's very interesting because the Bauck action, for instance, that we talked about at Lazarat.
Lieutenant Bauck, yes.
Yeah, is known about, right? And is one that's gone in the record. But there are loads of those kind of actions happening all over, where eventually people are overwhelmed and maybe they're all killed or they're all captured, and we don't know the full story. But the Americans are fighting like that everywhere, because if the Germans are having to deploy, companies against platoons or battalions against platoons, it's not going well, is it?
No.
There's no blitz in this particular bit of Krieg. Well, there isn't, is there?
Yeah.
It's shit's Krieg. This really is.
It's shit's Krieg.
Fuller is called, Norman Cota calls Fuller and says, you're going to hang on.
You got to hold on at all costs.
At all costs.
Hurley Fuller.
And he knows what that...
Christened Hurley.
Hurley Holland.
He's not called Jim. He's called Hurley.
I think you'd be a different person if you were called Hurley Holland, Jim. You know how names name you. Names register who you are.
Yeah, owners of dogs and all that.
Exactly, okay. Hurley Holland.
From now on, I want to be known as Hurley.
But, he's told to fight to the last round, last man.
by Kota.
Yeah.
And that kind of is really what's going on at this point. 700, and this is the ridge to Clever, and the Clever road protects the road into Bastogne. So, and that's kind of our first, or maybe our second mention of Bastogne in this so far. I think for those of you who,
Bastogne,
if you've come at the Battle of the Bulge through popular culture, the fact that we've only mentioned the B word once or twice is an indication of how much more there is to this battle than perhaps that perception. So 707th Tank Battalion is sent forward to Marnach in hope of keeping the road.
Marnach is one of those villages on the Skyline Drive.
Yeah, and they're there to keep the road blocked. But by the morning, the Germans are almost in Clairvaux. 110th Regiment's artillery is down to one battery, and the 707th have lost 8 Shermans, which have been picked off. But the point is, this fighting is, again, the Germans
second day
don't want to be fighting here.
No.
And there's a castle, isn't there? A big castle in the middle.
Oh my God, yeah, in the middle. So Clairvaulx's amazing because the river kind of runs round it in one of those sort of snaky things, and it's got this deep-sided escarpment running around the town, and then they're down in the bottom, encased by the river and this sort of steep escarpment, wooded escarpment, is Clairvaux itself with its castle right at the centre, and it's all very kind of sort of Middle Europa. I mean, it's very cool. It's actually a lovely place. It's a lovely little town now. But the castle is, a thick-walled bastion.
Yeah.
There's no getting away from it.
Yeah. Cota's holed up there, isn't he?
No, he's further back. He's
further back.
But Fuller is.
Yes, right. Yeah, Fuller's headquarters, isn't it? And, obviously, war film cliche, as we all know, is the sound of a piano playing between the crashes of shells.
Yes, but it really happened.
It really happened on this occasion. It's a GI playing Debussy's Reflections in the Water without a note missed.
Yes,
apparently.
As the shells are crashing all around him.
I love it.
But the amazing thing is the Americans just don't really give up. They get overrun, but they don't give up. They're not throwing in the towel. By nightfall on the 17th of December, X+1, the Germans are in the town. They're swarming through the town, but there are still little American outposts and snipers. At 6:25 p.m., Fuller abandons his headquarters. But then his headquarters and most of Company G are captured. And that shows you just how last minute they've left it, how they have taken Cota's words to kind of hold on at all costs. They've taken it very literally.
Yeah.
And there's some Americans who hold out in the chateau right through the 18th of December. In other words, they're still not throwing in the towel. And they're still making life difficult for the Germans, who then got to kind of stop and pause and kind of winkle them out. And all this, of course, just eats up time. And time is what this is all about. This whole operation is based around time and speed and moving on. So the more you can delay the Germans, the more their whole operational plan starts to crumble very, very badly.
Yeah.
And the action of the 110th Infantry Regiment around Skyline Drive and Marnach and the town of Clairvaux is just an epic. It's an absolute epic. They get overrun, they get lost, they get put in the bag and all the rest of it. But the damage they have inflicted over 2 days is immense for the Germans. All the German momentum has gone. Already those panzer divisions are being sucked into this attritional battle rather than the exploitative battle.
Then the 106th Division.
So pushing northwards. So we started the last episode. We started X Day going in the north and working southwards. We're now starting in the south and working northwards.
106th Divisional Artillery pulls back, pulling back to Schoenberg. And there's that we did a then and now when we were there recently. There's that 90mm anti-tank gun in the grotto on the road
as it's climbing out of the town.
Yeah, exactly. With a rather nervous-looking crew on their anti-tank gun, and that's the American heavy anti-tank gun, isn't it? That can supposedly fix anything. By 9 in the morning, I mean, the problem is there are German units behind them. They're pulling back to Schoenberg. The Germans have gone round them because Manteuffel's looking to encircle rather than just bash at the American lines. By 9, the 422nd, 423rd are surrounded, but the Germans have been ordered to keep going. So there are gaps and there are men streaming through the lines the whole time and trying to reorganize themselves and get together, aren't there? So these 2 regiments, they set up perimeters and they've been told that Combat Command B of the 7th is on its way and that there'll be airdrops, but Combat Command B are caught in traffic. They're not going to arrive. And this is part of the confusion from the phone call as well. Who's where and why they're there and all that sort of stuff. At 2:45, and when does it get dark?
Well, sort of 5.
Yeah, so the day's
4:35. There's only 8 hours of daylight this time.
So the daylight's really running out. So at 2:45, orders are issued for the 2 regiments to withdraw. They don't get the orders until midnight. It's all so unfortunate for these guys. Everything just doesn't join up. It's an unhappy ending, really.
And we were up in those hills above Schoenberg the other day, and we were wandering around and find all these foxholes of this stand by the 106th. You could absolutely see them, couldn't you? All in a row.
Yeah. And then on the 18th, they're ordered further instructions come at 7:30 in the morning to get out and to go to said Vit, but they can't. They can't do it. They try putting in a counterattack and all this sort of stuff, but they've run out of ammunition.
Yeah, and actually the decision has been made on the afternoon of the 18th that Combat Command B of the 7th and Combat Command B of the 9th just cannot get to them. So that they are not going to attempt to go and rescue them. They are going to hold the line at St. Vit instead. Yeah.
And so, I mean, basically, they surrender.
They're on their own.
They're on their own, so they surrender. So that 4:23rd surrender on the afternoon of the 19th, 4:22nd between 2:30 and 4 o'clock. And it's not an every man for yourself thing, isn't it? The commanding officer goes, you know what? We're going to have to throw in the towel here. And this is Kurt Vonnegut's part of this, isn't it? And this is the thing where he says, I joined the wave of humiliation. Yes. And this is 7,000 guys going in the bag, which is the biggest single setback for the US Army in Europe, in the European theatre of operations.
Yep. It's a bad moment.
It's a very, very bad, a low moment. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll take a break and we'll look at what's happening in the two villages. Yeah?
Yeah.
Why not? See you in a second.
We passed over a destroyed land.
Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. We just ended on a rather down moment of the biggest surrender in the US Army. It's not good, is it?
Yeah, but it requires context. I mean,
absolutely.
Don't forget that's still the 19th of December. So that is, 16th, 17th, 18th. That's the fourth day. Yeah. So they're holding up German troops until that point. St. Vit is absolutely key to the successes of the 5th Panzer Army. And then they're nowhere near St. Vit at this point. Well, they are. They're near it, but they still haven't got...
It's not good enough.
It's not good enough. They're not there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the thrust of 1st SS Panzer Corps through the Lossheimgraben in the next episode, because that, of course, is Kampfgruppe Piper. And we're going to do a whole episode, if not two, on KG Piper.
The notorious KG Piper, I think.
The notorious KG, the infamous KG Piper. So we're going to go through that next. But in this one, we're going to leapfrog over the Lossheimgraben and head back to that northern bit in the Krinkelterwald and the Battle of the Two Villages, because in the last episode when we were up there, we were looking at we were saying how the 12th SS had been brought in earlier than Price, commander of 1st SS Panzer Corps, had wanted to, because the Volksgrenadier divisions just simply couldn't get through the woods, the Wald, quickly enough. But by the morning of the 17th, they are starting to kind of push their way through. Yeah. And it's absolutely clear that General Giraud of the... is it Giraud? We keep getting this wrong, don't we?
It's Giraud, I think.
Giraud. General Giraud, who is the commander of the 5th Corps, which is part of Hodges' 1st Army, is sort of ahead of Hodges in reading the situation. Yeah. And he recognises that the two villages of Rockerat and Krinkhout need to be held absolutely as long as possible, because he can see where the thrust is coming. It's coming through this forest. Once you get through the other side of the forest, you have to get through Krinkhout and Rockerat before you can start moving on to the Elsenborn Ridge. And the key thing about the road that passes through this and goes up onto the Elsenborn Ridge is this is the quickest road to the Meuse and indeed subsequently to Antwerp. Yes. So this is why this is so important.
Yeah. And when you're there, I mean, we were there in January, the traffic rolls through there. You can tell it's a major thoroughfare. Those enormous log lorries coming through the town.
Yes, thundering
hurtling through the town. These gigantic lorries. The issue here, of course, is they've gone from fighting in woodland and then rolling country, and now they're basically in a built-up area, which if you're armour, is hugely problematic.
Well, yes, but even before they get to the villages, they've got to get past these blocking positions. And what's really interesting is there are these roads that lead out of Krinkhout and Rockerat, which then bifurcate again and bifurcate again. And where these roads all converge ahead, to the east of the villages, is an obvious blocking position. Yeah. And one of the key ones of these is at Lorsdale. And the Lorsdale Crossroads is the scene of an epic defence.
An amazing defence.
Yeah. So by dawn of the 17th of December, the 99th Checkerboard Division is still fighting in the woods. Yeah. And that allows Giroud to organise these blocking positions because the 2nd Infantry Division, which had been where the Golden Lions were on the Schnee Eifel, has been moved north for this assault on the Ruhr dams. And that Ruhr dam assault has now been cancelled and they've been sent southwards. But actually, you're only talking about kind of 5-6 miles, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't got a huge distance to go. So let's just go through this kind of sort of bit by bit, shall we? So 12:30 p.m. on the 17th. So this is X+1, 2nd day. This is way more than 24 hours on. Kampfgruppe Müller of the 12th SS Hitler Jugend Division finally emerges from the Krunkhalterwald. There's these 2 trails that go for, main trails that they're using. One of them is the Schwarzenbruck Trail, which is Rollbahn A. And they finally emerged. And we walked down that route, didn't we, a little bit?
Yeah.
And I mean, you're so canalized by this trail. Which is basically a forest track. It's like a dead straight forest track that runs straight through the middle of it. You can shove your drone up and there's your straight line going through and it's all pine trees and, thick as you like. You can say what you like, but no Panther tank is getting through that wood.
Yeah.
So the only way they're going to get through is by these trails, and that is a toe-to bumper kind of thing. This is line astern rather than line abreast. And that means that at some point your point man has got to take the lead and just emerge into the open from the forest, which makes it very, very vulnerable.
Yes. And the Americans exploit this completely. So in the afternoon, Kampfgruppe Müller run into a blocking position by men from 23rd Infantry, who are from 2nd Infantry Division, and 2
Which has just arrived.
Shermans. Yeah, and 2 Shermans of the 741st Tank Battalion, who
lost nearly everything on Omaha Beach on D-Day when they
with their DDs,
sent in first too early and all sank.
Yeah. This blocking position, again, you said a moment ago, it's all about time. They hold them up till dusk. Yeah. They do a good job of it. And so...
so about, for 4 hours, basically. 5 hours.
Yeah. And Lieutenant Colonel William D. McKinley, who is he his nephew?
He's a nephew of President McKinley.
Yeah, who was assassinated.
Who's the tariff man, of course. He's the man who likes imposing tariffs.
Trump's idol, yeah.
Hero.
He's the commanding officer, 1st 9th Infantry from 2nd Division. They get to the 2 villages and he rushes forward to block the road at the Lausdal crossroads. And when you go there, it's country lanes that sort of separate.
There's country lane, there's a farmhouse, isn't there? There's a farmhouse just on the left-hand side.
That's right. The road goes up to the farmhouse.
Yeah, and the other one goes straight on. There's fields on the right. Just up ahead, literally kind of half a mile away, is the Krunkhalterwald. It's undulating. It's not, it's not flat, but it's not particularly hilly. You can see your field of fire is pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually, it's
great tank country in summer.
It's great tank country in summer, but in the winter, not so great. And he says streams of men and vehicles were pouring down the forest roads through the junction in wild confusion and disorder. Control of the 99th Division had been irretrievably lost, and the stragglers echoed each other with remarks that their units had been surrounded and annihilated. But he goes, no, we're not having that then.
Well, you can tell he's a 2nd Division man, not a 99th Division man, to be fair. But,
Yeah, and he gets cracking, doesn't he? They put out anti-tank mines and they dig in
daisy
and
chains of anti-tank mines on the roads at front.
Yeah.
They've got bazooka teams.
Yeah.
By 6:40 p.m., the German armour, under cover of darkness, passes the roadblock. So this is just a handful of Panthers managed to sort of just sidestep it. And again, when you're standing on that crossroads, it's not really a crossroads, is it? It's like a fork with different prongs.
Yeah.
You could see how they could just cross the fields to the south.
Yeah.
And squeeze past. And one of the reasons they do is because they've been told that there's some Americans and tanks up ahead. And so when they hear the squeak of tanks, they assume it's the Americans pulling back. And that's how these 2 tanks get, these couple of Panthers managed to get across.
Yeah.
But, and so these 2 tanks get past and do hit another crossroads, which hits the 1st Battalion of the 38th Infantry, which is also part of the 2nd Infantry Division. There's very, very vicious fighting. It's discovered that 57mm anti-tank gun, which is, of course, is a British 6-pounder, is not so hot against Panthers.
Yeah, not on the front of a Panther. It's all right side and rear, but it's the front armour it can't deal with.
Yeah, and so, but bazooka teams are much more effective, not least because they're much more manoeuvrable. You can sort of scuttle around. And of course, all this is dark. It's 6:40 p.m. It's pitch black. Apart from kind of the flicker of lights from explosions and so on.
Yeah.
So, you can do stuff in stealth, which, this is why the British have thing that you don't use tanks after dark.
Yeah.
For precisely this reason.
Because you can't defend them.
But the Germans are in a rush, so they haven't got any choice.
And you've got desperate stuff though. Guys running up to tanks and pouring petrol on them and setting them on fire. There's a man, I can't remember, oh God, what was his name? Who's killed there, who climbs on a Panther and uses the machine gun on the Panther on the Germans. It's absolutely desperate. They're all right on top of each other's stuff.
It's incredibly impressive, isn't it, how hard they fight here? For this sort of total non-entity of a patch of land about which no one cares very much, apart from the people who actually live there. Yeah. It's incredibly inconsequential in the big scheme of things. But in this moment, the fighting is just absolutely ferocious. So basically these two sergeants of McKinley's lot. And basically, we should also say this is known as a task force. This is effectively a battle group. This is an ad hoc. This is stragglers from the 99th Infantry who aren't pulled in on this. This is forward observation officers from a different artillery unit. This is a handful of tanks. And it's men from different units who are, based around the 1st Battalion. But there's also men from the 3rd Battalion here, because there's Company K, isn't there? Which is 3rd Battalion of the 9th Infantry. So they're all thrown together and they just sort of get on with it. And 2 sergeants of McKinley's 1st Battalion run up to this disabled Panther. So basically, the Panther's come through. The first one's been knocked out, but it's still firing. Yeah, and with both its machine guns and its main gun. And so these 2 sergeants go up in the darkness, and they decide to get round the back of it and pour petrol on it. And at that moment, the hatch opens at the top of the Panther. That's right. And someone lobs out a grenade, and they jump to it and run. And one of them gets badly wounded, doesn't he, by the blast of the grenade. But they then, in turn, throw a phosphorus grenade onto the back of the Panther, which then ignites the fuel. The whole thing brews up. Yeah. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And 15 minutes after that event, a lieutenant stalks a Tiger tank and knocks it out with a bazooka. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah. That's all, 8:30 p.m. that night, the 17th. Finally, the full weight of Kampfgruppe Müller attacks McKinley's lot at the Lausdal crossroads. And 17 hours of fighting follows. Yeah. That night, while the fighting's going on at Lausdal, 4 Jagdpanzers, which is a Panzer IV chassis with a 88 on it, I think. Yeah, I think so. Maybe a 75. I'm not sure. But a high velocity anti-tank gun. Tons of variants. Yeah. And a platoon of Panzer Grenadiers. They managed to sort of get past the Lausdal crossroads, but they're still being held up there. That's the point. Yeah. Yes, they're not driving through it. They've got to go around it. This is the point. So the following morning, 18th December at this point. So at dawn at 8:30, Company K of the 9th are overrun. And this is the lot which is by that farmhouse that we mentioned just a minute ago. Yes, yeah. And there's a very good picture that one of them drew of the landscape. 1 officer left, 10 GIs managed to pull back. During the morning, the German armour gets into Rockerath, but again, the Panzer Grenadiers, the infantry support that the tanks need are cut down in the attack, and 12 SS lose lots of their armour to bazooka teams and actually 57mm guns because the quote at the start we had from Willy Fischer was about a crew on a 57mm doing for him, wasn't it? Well, yes, that's happening in the middle of the day on the 18th of December, the same day. It's not until 1 p.m. that McKinley's lot pulled back from the Lausdal crossroads. That's amazing. Under the cover of 4 Shermans of the 741st Tank Battalion. Yeah. And they managed to sort of scuttle back, and there's then house-to-house fighting in Rockerath. In Rockerath, yeah. Which is what Fisher's talking about. 5 Panthers get to Krinkelt, and they do manage to shell the American command post, but they lose 4 of them. 4 tanks are lost. Yeah. And that amazing photograph of those 2 Panthers sort of knocked out outside this house with a kind of sort of farmhouse attached to it. Yeah. And that's still there in the kind of main drag in Rockerath, isn't it? And you can go there and match up the then and now photograph of it. Completely matched up. And then in the evening, Major General Walter Robertson, who's the commander of 2nd Div, he orders a withdrawal to Wertfeld, which is a couple of miles to the west. So shorten his lines, tidy up. Yeah. But the point is, that's the end of the 18th. 3 days. 3 days. Yeah. Squandered. And at that point, Price orders the 12th SS to pull back completely and leaves the 3rd Panzer Grenadiers, who anyone who's listened to any of our Italian podcasts will be familiar with them from southern Italy and so on. Yeah. So the fighting in the 2 villages, basically, completely, for 3 entire days, 12 SS Hitlerjugend are held up. Yeah, they're supposed to be at the Meuse by then. They're supposed to be at the Meuse. Yeah, they've not gone 10 miles. They've barely passed 6 miles. Yeah, and they've expended their exploitation troops at the breakthrough. So they've. Well, what Price now does is he now redirects the 12th SS just a little bit further south to Bullingen and Domain Bertgenbach, which we'll be looking at in later episodes. But the 12th SS is, just can't get through. And of course, the defense of these twin villages allows 5th Corps, part of the US First Army, to build up defences on the all-important Elsenborn Ridge.
Yeah.
And by dawn of the 19th of December, the shortest route to the Meuse is completely blocked.
Yeah.
And so far, the Germans have lost around 60 tanks and AFVs, armoured fighting vehicles at this point, which is a big bite, when a division has only got, double that, if.
Right, so that was the battle for the Twin Villages in this second part of this episode. In our next episode, we'll be looking at the most notorious, infamous of all the Panzer battle groups, Kampfgruppe Piper, whose exploits, I think, are also a kind of the other thing about the Battle of the Bulge that people know about, and also offer a clue to some of the American motivation when the moment comes, doesn't it?
Yes.
Is the truth.
Yeah,
we often scratch our heads and wonder why American lads from, Louisiana fighting here. Piper's men's behaviour offers us a very strong motivation, as we'll see.
Indeed.
Thanks very much for listening. If you want to subscribe and listen to those in one enormous lump, then you can subscribe to our Apple channel, Officer Class, or We Have Ways of Making You Talk Patreon, of course. Better still, come to We Have Ways Fest in September, 12th to 14th of September. Tickets are on sale at wehavewaysfest.co.uk. You can come, you can camp, you can drink beer with like-minded war wafflers. You can listen to lectures. You can perv on tanks if that's what you want to do. Everything you could possibly want to do with the Second World War in a field for a weekend. Thanks very much for listening. We will be back with Kampfgruppe Piper and then the appalling Joachim Piper. I'm going to stick my neck up there. I don't think that's a controversial opinion. And we'll see you next time. Cheerio.
Cheerio.